You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly.
Good morning, everyone. This is Christine Nicholas, the chair of the New York State Tourism Advisory Council, and I'd like to call this meeting to order at 11:02. We'll start by taking attendance. I'll call the names on the RSVP list that I have here. And if you are available, if you are here, please state. Hold on, just have to open it up. Okay, Dan Fuller.
I'm here. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Dan. Anthony Davidovitz.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, Anthony. David Filipiak.
Hello, Christine. I'm here.
Hi. Valerie Knobloch.
Here. Morning.
Hi, Val. Eleanor Tatum. Ali Sirota. I heard you, Ali.
Here.
Barbara Lee. Tom Mulroy. And Catherine Nichols.
Good morning.
Hi. I know you're in the car, Catherine, so be careful. And then ESD staff, we have Ross, Kelly, and Rich, right? Anybody else from ESD? Okay, great.
Alana Petroselli, TAC.
Hi. Hey, anybody else I missed? Okay, then we'll get started. All the members have been emailed a copy of the minutes, and they're also available on the ESD website. If there are any changes to the minutes, speak now. Not hearing any changes, a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, and I think that was Anthony and Dan, right?
I believe. Yep.
Okay, very good. All right, all in favor. You know what, when we're on these, I'm going to say any opposed. Is that okay? Does that still fit with the minutes, the rules? Because any opposed? Okay, the motion carries, minutes are approved. At this time, I'm going to please ask that everyone go on mute if you're not speaking. So I'd like to begin by highlighting Governor Hochul's extraordinary tourism recovery announcement, which hopefully many of you were able to attend in person or you were able to stream. As members of the TAC, we were all invited to the November 8th event at the American Museum of Natural History, along with several other tourism industry leaders and elected officials to hear about her Bring Back Tourism, Bring Back Jobs program. The recovery program, which has the sole purpose of reviving tourism and the hospitality workforce here in New York State, will dedicate $450 million in state aid to support New York State's hardest hit tourism sector workers, revitalize the state's tourism industry, and support small businesses that started just prior to or during the pandemic. It is currently the largest tourism state aid program in the nation, which shows how strongly Governor Hochul views the tourism industry. In fact, in her words, New York State isn't fully back until the tourism industry is fully back. I was able to attend and speak at the event, which was an incredible honor. I want to thank Ross and Kelly for helping me out with that. It was really a terrific event. There were so many folks, and I know that it was somewhat last minute, which we apologize for, which, you know, I got a couple of calls of people that couldn't make it. But I just think the fact that we were all together, and by the way, it was on the day when international tourism was reopened, our borders were reopened. So it was a very historic day too. And as if that announcement wasn't enough to signal Governor Hochul's support to our industry, her attendance at the NYSTIA annual meeting surely was. The meeting took place in late October in Chautauqua County, the first in-person meeting since 2019, and Governor Hochul delivered opening remarks on October 21st after being presented with a one-of-a-kind glass artwork piece created by the Corning Museum of Glass in recognition of her longstanding commitment to New York State tourism. Governor Hochul has long been a champion of New York State tourism, and her presence at NYSTIA conference is evidence of her continued commitment to ensuring the success of our industry. Other recent announcements that show the governor's commitment to tourism include the opening of the Autism Nature Trail in Letchwork State Park. It's the nation's first nature trail specifically designed to address various sensory needs. The opening of a $2 million Eastgate Plaza outside the Poughkeepsie entrance to the walkway over the Hudson State Historic Park. The expanded gathering space more than doubles the size of the pathway atop the Washington Street stairs and provides an ideal location for community events. The beginning of construction for a new $46 million state-of-the-art visitor center in Niagara Falls State Park. The new facility will be a gateway to adventure along the Niagara River corridor, greatly improving the visitor experience and encouraging longer visits within the park year-round. The newly built center is due to open in the spring of 2023. The award of $20.7 million for strategic infrastructure enhancements at 24 public use airports across New York. The state funding will enhance safety, facilitate innovation, advance business development, and promote sustainability and resilience at these facilities. The unveiling of a new vision for a world-class Penn Station and revitalized surrounding neighborhood that reflects the community's needs and focuses on public transit and public realm improvements. The plan prioritizes the reconstruction of the existing state station, while the station expansion and the Gateway Project initiatives, both of which the governor strongly supports, continue on their federally established timelines. The announcement of a mascot, winner of the Lake Placid 2023 FISU World University Games, and it's called Adirondack Mac. So he got some play too in the downstate papers this weekend. So really happy about that. So looking forward to meeting Adirondack Mac. And the governor personally welcoming visitors back to Broadway, of which we have a clip to share with you now.
Kathy Hochul.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to the Queendom of New York. But first of all, I know there's not a single person in this audience who paid for this ticket to see a politician speak, right? Okay, we've established that. I'll be so brief, but I am here just to tell you how grateful I am that you are here, that we are coming back, and to start spreading the news. Broadway is back, and we are here to celebrate. And what better place to come than to celebrate women power than with the Queens. So everyone, enjoy the show, tell all your friends, and we are open. We love New York.
Okay, trivia time. Okay, what Broadway show did the governor go to?
6.
6, that's right, very good. 6, which is about the Queens during Henry VIII's reign. So a lot of fun. It's a show that's going to bring a lot of tweens back to Times Square. It's got some catchy music and whatnot. I haven't seen it yet. Have you seen it? Not yet. Okay.
Not yet.
So we'll add it to our list. Since we last met, the Biden administration announced that both air and land international borders would reopen to international travelers. And as of November 8th, as I mentioned earlier, non-US citizens who are not immigrants to the United States are required to be fully vaccinated and provide proof of vaccination status to enter the United States. There are very limited exceptions to this vaccination requirement, one of which includes children under the age of 18. Non-citizen travelers entering the US by air will be of an FDA or WHO approved COVID-19 vaccination and show a negative pre-departure COVID-19 test taken no more than 3 days before they board their flight to the United States. Unvaccinated travelers must meet one of the conditions for the exception. Non-citizen travelers entering the US by land or ferry will be required to show proof of vaccination and verbally attest to their reason for travel and vaccination status during the border inspection. You'll remember at our last meeting, we had discussed writing a letter to advocate for the border reopening, which is now no longer necessary due to the recent developments. The November 8th reopening is a long-awaited development that is vital to the recovery of our industry, and we certainly welcome it. And I'll tell you, just from a personal note, I've been in Manhattan quite a bit, and on November 11th, I was there for the Veterans Day Parade, and the amount of foreign international visitors, it was really wonderful to see so many of them come back so quickly. So before we move on to the I Love New York report, oh, by the way, Eleanor Tatum has joined the group. Thank you, Eleanor, for letting me know. Welcome. Before we move on to the I Love New York report, I have one housekeeping item, the proposed 2022 meeting dates. And as of now, we have set aside the following dates: Monday, January 24th, Monday, March 21st, Monday, May 23rd, Monday, September 19th, and Monday, November 14th. We've reviewed the 2022 calendar to ensure the proposed dates don't conflict with any holidays or events. And that said, please know that these dates may change depending on unforeseen conflicts, and Kelly will follow up with the dates in an email. So that concludes my report. Thank you all. Are there any questions before I turn it over to Ross? Not hearing any questions. Ross Levi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Christine. Good morning, everyone. In order to get us started, I think, as I've done at the last few meetings, I thought it'd be appropriate to review the status of the tourism industry. And even before we look at where we are today, I think it continues to be important to have the perspective and understand the progress we've made so far. So obviously, you know, we all remember the record levels we were at previous to COVID, and it comes as no surprise that COVID dealt a severe blow to our previous record-breaking progress. And when we actually look at those 2020 tourism numbers, we can see how that actually played out. The greatest percentage decreases really were all connected to international visitation. Total international visitation was down 86% from 14.5 million to 2 million. Canadian spending was down 71.8% from 1.42 billion to 0.4 billion. And total overseas spending was down 80% from 19.22 billion to 3.74 billion. That obviously, those are huge, devastating numbers, and that had a disproportionately negative effect on certain areas of the state like New York City and Buffalo and Greater Niagara, who rely so heavily on international visitors. We also saw a significant dip in domestic visitation, down 37% from 250 million visitors, our record number pre-COVID, to 157.5 million visitors. Which obviously then led to losses in both direct spending and economic impact. So, you know, the numbers show what we felt and knew and were hearing, that it was the roughest time in New York State tourism that I'm aware of, certainly. Now, the good news is there is some rebounding happening for 2021. We won't have the visitation numbers for some time, but looking at the indicators that we currently have available, for example, hotel data, we are starting to see rebound in many areas of the state. Many of our vacation regions have seen an increase in hotel occupancy from 20 to 2021. In some regions, those occupancy rates are nearing actually what they were in 2019. In some cases, less than a 10% difference from 2019. So that's a pretty strong rebound. However, that's not the story everywhere. It's an uneven story in different areas of the state. For example, notably New York City, we see a number of regions are still struggling to get back to their pre-pandemic levels. The same is true when we take a look at employment data. At a previous meeting, we reported that according to the New York State Department of Labor, the leisure and hospitality sector lost approximately 586,000 jobs in the first few months of the pandemic. And looking at the most recent employment numbers that we have, which are from September of 2021, many regions are at 80% or higher of their pre-pandemic employment levels. So that's a pretty good recovery. In fact, every region outside of New York City is at 85% or higher. And two upstate regions, the North Country and Western New York, have higher leisure and hospitality industry employment now compared to their monthly average from 2019. So basically kind of back to where they were in a couple of areas. But again, we have to keep an eye on those areas that are still struggling. The big caveat, of course, being New York City, which is just at over 65% its employment. So, and as we know, when it comes to tourism, because New York City is such an important part of the tourism pie, if that area is struggling, then we're struggling statewide as far as tourism goes. So while it's great to see these numbers climbing, we know that many tourism businesses are still struggling to find employees. And we would be remiss to point out that our workforce is still down 20% statewide from our full pre-pandemic level. So the takeaway from all this is that there is certainly improvement in tourism from the depths of the pandemic, but we are not yet where we want to be and where we need to be. Travel restrictions for the fully vaccinated international travelers that Christine mentioned, that being lifted by the federal government, we certainly hope will help visitation, particularly in those still struggling areas like New York City and Greater Niagara and elsewhere. But we're not just waiting. We're trying to do our part on a state level to keep those numbers going in the right direction. For example, as Christine noted, the big tourism recovery package that Governor Hochul announced last week really is unprecedented state support for the tourism industry. And not just in the marketing front, which, although it includes that too, which we're used to hearing, but really taking a look at our industry as a whole and seeing what the state can do to help. Hopefully, as Christine said, you saw the announcement or got to see the press release, but just to do a brief recap here, that program includes a $100 million tourism worker recovery fund that supports New Yorkers in the most impacted tourism and hospitality industry sectors who were on the extended federal unemployment insurance the last week before those benefits ended and have yet to see their earnings fully recover. So New York State DOL will issue one-time payments of $2,750 to as many as 36,000 qualified workers in tourism sector industries. And New Yorkers who are eligible for that will be contacted directly via text or email. The second piece was a $100 million return to work grant program. This is designed to encourage tourism businesses that suffered job and revenue losses to rehire workers and providing financial relief to them to do that. Qualifying tourism businesses will be eligible for grants of up to $5,000 per net new full-time employee or $2,500 per net new part-time employee hired to offset their labor costs. To receive the full benefit, employers will have to maintain employment increases over 6 months. And employment increases will be based on total employment rather than any specific individual employee. It's about the number of employees you have, not any individual person. And businesses that can demonstrate the greatest workforce losses during the COVID-19 will be a priority as that money goes out. There was also an announcement of a $25 million Meet in New York grant program. This program focuses on venues and events to generate and support new business-focused travel. It's part of the holistic approach to tourism, not just the individual leisure travel, but also recognizing this as a very important segment for our industry here in New York State. And it recognizes the spending habits of businesses and convention travelers and the money they generate through overnight stays and food and activity and all those things. The Meet in New York program will provide grants to help convention centers and other conference spaces like hotels that act as conference spaces, will help them to bring more events and traveler spending and jobs back to New York State. Qualifying venues and their partnering event hotels can offer meeting organizers discounts on booking fees or room blocks to entice business, with the state grants reimbursing a portion of those discounts. And then there was a marketing component, which we like to see as always, a $25 million I Love New York global marketing campaign, a consumer-facing global tourism promotion, which extends a new invitation to domestic and international visitors and will allow us here at I Love New York to expand our current marketing efforts into additional domestic and international markets. It'll include broadcast and digital elements that promote the state as the world's premier travel destination and encouraging visitors to come be a part of it and find what they love right here in the Empire State. And then there was also announced a $200 million program for businesses started just prior to or during the pandemic. This is going to have to be done through legislation, but the governor announced her plans to introduce that legislation in January at the start of the legislative session to create a $200 million program designed to support businesses started just prior to or during the pandemic. It would utilize existing funding in the state's $800 million COVID-19 pandemic small business recovery grant program to support these younger businesses that were otherwise ineligible for relief through existing state and federal programs to ensure greater inclusivity among small and micro businesses. So more to come on that. So it was obviously a very exciting day, I think, for tourism. And a very exciting day in our post-pandemic recovery. There was more good funding news just today. If you follow the governor's Twitter account, you will see, as she tweeted this morning, we've received word that the state's proposal for the federal EDA state tourism grant that I discussed at the last TAC meeting was accepted. So we're excited that New York State will be receiving our full share of that non-competitive funding, close to $45 million, which we will be able to spend over the next 3 to 4 years to help support the state's tourism recovery. So we're excited about that. So in addition to those announcements, we've continued to be hard at work here at I Love New York, particularly as the borders are reopening, as travelers are feeling good about traveling again, to get the word out that there's no better place they can come than New York State. Since we last met, we launched a new New York City focused commercial. You know, as we were discussing, New York City is one of the regions still greatly struggling to get back to pre-pandemic levels. And a lot of this had to do with those closed international borders. So we're hoping that this ad, as the borders reopen, help turn the tide and remind people that New York City is the greatest place they can ever imagine to visit, and they should come here. So this ad we'll show you now. Take a look.
Give my regards to Broadway. Remember me to Herald Square. Tell all the gang at 42nd Street that I will soon be there. Whisper of how I'm yearning to mingle with the old-time throng. Give my regards to old Broadway and say that I'll be there ere long.
As you can see, it's a very fast-paced ad, and the stutter step on Zoom doesn't do it justice. So be sure to go to our YouTube channel to see it in all its glory. It's currently running statewide in neighboring states and Canada through Thanksgiving on both broadcast and digital. And then it's also playing overseas with those borders reopening in the UK and Germany digitally. You know, as you can see, it was sort of designed to showcase the life and vitality of New York City, featuring a combination of marquee attractions and even those everyday moments that tell the world that New York City is back and better than ever. And so we were excited about that. Our fall Foliage campaign is coming to an end. It was another successful year. It was great to feel that one of our signature campaigns was back to normal, really, with lots of press coverage, lots of digital traction. It generally is our most popular digital program of the year. And this year, the I Love New York Fall Foliage Report page garnered 564,000 page views, through its final week 10. It's the most viewed page on our site, accounting for 28% of total page views at ilovenewyork.com. And a total of 408,000 users visited the page through week 10. It also got the PR coverage that it often gets. Channel 2 in Buffalo and Channel 13 in Albany referenced the report as part of the Foliage updates. There were weekly updates in the Albany Times-Union. We even had a whole segment on Lee Goldberg's Whether or Not. You may know Lee Goldberg as the meteorologist for WABC in New York City. And he does this basically a web show, and a 10-minute show was dedicated to fall foliage in New York. I was invited to discuss places to visit and experience the changing colors. We'll show a brief clip of that for you now.
I am a foliage junkie. I love the fall color around the area. So cue Ross Levi, the Executive Director, New York State Division of Tourism. I love New York. We all know that. Ross, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we're starting to see some splashes of color at the time of this taping. Adirondacks, Catskills, a little bit in the Hudson Valley. Can you talk about the patterns of foliage and how things are likely to evolve?
Sure. New York State has a fairly predictable pattern every year, where, as you noted, starting in mid-September, sort of in the mountains, in the Adirondacks, the Catskills, that's where you start seeing the first brilliant splashes of color. But then it spreads pretty rapidly throughout the state to other parts of the state, central New York, the Finger Lakes, the Thousand Island regions, Greater Niagara, and kind of the grand finale tends to be more downstate, New York City, Long Island, that kind of area.
Yeah, I know sometimes when we're ready to cover the New York City Marathon and the finish line, the park is actually the last to go there in early November. So even if it is a little bit later this year, when are we talking about the peak color in the different regions of the
Well, that gives you a sense of where we're at. That's also available via the web if you want to see more. And speaking of public relations, Lisa Soto and Finn Partners and her team have several initiatives that are working to promote winter travel. It's not too early. I just finished completing 2 days of desk side interviews last week, where we did 9 back-to-back interviews. They're jam-packed days over those 2 days with travel editors from Travel and Leisure, FARS, Hemisphere's In-Flight magazine, to list just a few. And it allowed us to pitch new and recent tourism developments, as well as upcoming anniversaries, events, and openings for the holiday season in 2022. So we're hoping that will get those editors assigning stories so we get the coverage we're looking for New York State. We also hosted a satellite media tour on November 8th, where we contracted with a company that does these media tours and a travel expert to arrange appearances in hundreds of TV, web, and radio shows across the country. And as a result of that, a total of 29.4 million impressions from 1,653 TV placements and 94 web and radio placements, all the way from Chicago to Atlanta and to Houston, Salt Lake City, as well as some national placements, allowed us to focus on holiday and winter travel in New York State. So we were excited to have that opportunity. The Outdoor Writers Association of America conference in Vermont was held in early October. Finn Partners met and spoke with more than 50 attendees in an in-depth capacity about New York travel. We're able to meet with National Geographic, Field and Stream, BBC News, and many, many more. We found out that an editorial feature in Travel, Taste, and Tour magazine, their winter issue, will be published for December. We're working on a press release announcing the official start of the winter travel season. Plus, we continue to do pitching around holiday and winter travel. So a lot going on for earned media. We have, of course, been focusing on the reopening of New York's border with Canada as well. As I think most of you know, the US is the most popular destination for Canadian travelers, and Canada is the largest source of international visitation to the US. Pre-pandemic, 20 million people visited from Canada annually and spent $22 billion. Since TAC last met, the Division of Tourism finalized our contract with Toronto-based firm Reach Global Marketing. So we are very happy to again have I Love New York representation in Canada. We also convened the I Love New York Marketing Committee for a meeting on November 3rd. That Canadian Marketing Committee that I Love New York convenes comprises 25 representatives of New York State destinations and attractions that prioritize Canada as a important tourism marketing source. The committee was recently surveyed to identify their current and planned Canada marketing activity and needs so that we could support them through I Love New York and do things in as cohesive a manner as possible. When it met, the committee received a report from Reach, our new reps, on current consumer sentiment for the Canadian traveler and the status of Canadian tourism industry as a whole, plus insights from the committee survey and some ideas around action steps committee members could take to benefit from the pent-up demand of Canadians who travel to the US. Some specific Canadian travel segments that we're looking at include those looking for nature-related experience, adventure seekers, those driving on short trips and seeking deals, sort of thrifty traveler, and mature Canadians on their way to and from Florida, those snowbirds who drive either through New York State or come to airports in New York State as a potential market to be tapped. A total of 41 organizations participated in that call of the Canadian Marketing Committee, and that included our TPAs and lodging and attractions, along with ESD's digital and PR team members to help facilitate a coordinated approach to maximizing travel from Ontario and Quebec to New York State. So those Canadian efforts will of course continue and ramp up now that the border is opening. Since we last met, the Fall Path Through History Weekend took place October 9th through 11th. There were 105 events hosted by 94 sites, and happy that all 11 vacation regions were represented in that weekend. Consumer promotion for the weekend included a dedicated blog post and social media posts by I Love New York, a newsletter feature, and a dedicated press pitch. We are actively asking for historic and heritage sites to apply to become a designated path through history site, which allows them to host events year-round, which we are then able to promote. We will continue to include both live and virtual events next year as well. That was something, well, for a while there we were only virtual, then we were able to go virtual and in person, and that's been so popular and successful, we've decided to keep it going. It's still, even in digital format, brings people's attention to the great historic assets we have across New York State. And so we think it's a good way to get the word out and create future travelers to these sites, even if they don't go on the weekend itself. Weekend events hosts are open to both official and non-official historic and heritage sites and organizations. We don't limit the Path Through History Weekend just to the official PTH sites. We want as many events as possible. And so we are expecting another good year for 2022, which we'll begin organizing and promoting in late January. So those are our consumer-facing efforts. We also, though, of course, have been working to support our tourism industry. As Christine mentioned in her report, the NSTIA annual meeting took place in person in late October in Chautauqua. It's the first time NSTIA has met in person since early 2020, and it was just so great to be back together again. You really can feel the excitement and the warmth and frankly the gratitude that we're able to get together and see each other, and that positive energy only hit a fever pitch once you find out that the governor was coming to be a part of that. So having Governor Hochul there really was a morale boost at a time that's really helpful for the industry. In addition to that, there was an election of NSTIA's board of directors. There was educational panels, the 2021 Tourism Excellence Awards, even a trip to Jamestown and the National Comedy Center, which was terrific. I Love New York was there for both days of the annual meeting. In particular, we were involved in two different sessions. We did an informal meeting with TPAs to discuss what's on their minds, how things are going. And we did our formal I Love New York presentation to review the work we've been doing since the 2021 conference in early spring, sort of our annual report or semi-annual report to the industry. It was a great convening. We congratulate all the new board members at NISTIA and look forward to continuing our fruitful relationship with the important industry group. We were also able to have I Love New York representation for a session of the 2021 Travel Unity Summit earlier this month. As you've heard from previous years, and you may know from your work, Travel Unity focuses specifically on diversity and inclusion in the tourism industry here in New York State. And our own Kelly Garofalo-Wilkins was able to join the Disability Tourism and DEI panel, Finding Candidates and Welcoming Visitors. And she was able to discuss our Accessible New York program. She was joined by Susan Eisma from Legoland New York and Stephanie Rothfuss from the Marriott Marquis Chicago. There were attendees from all over the nation, so it was great for us to be able to highlight what New York State has been doing to welcome visitors of all abilities to our attractions all across New York State. Last meeting, I mentioned we would be hosting another tourism-specific job fair in partnership with the New York State Department of Labor. That took place on October 7th. Overall, we had 50 businesses and more than 1,000 job seekers attend over the 2 days. Based on a post-event survey from businesses, on average, businesses spoke with 3 candidates. 85% said it was superior than or same as the other virtual job fairs they have attended. And 61% they would participate in another similar job fair. So we took those as good results. While we think the job fair was certainly helpful for both businesses and employees, we are seeing some trends after hosting several of these. Perhaps the most important that just like the rest of the nation, New York State hospitality and tourism businesses are really having a very challenging time attracting employees. Post-survey results from both employers and job seekers indicate that there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between what candidates are looking for and which jobs are being offered. For example, we heard from employers that there weren't enough candidates to satisfy their needs, but job seekers said there weren't enough quality jobs for them. So as I'm sure many of you are hearing, job seekers are increasingly looking for jobs with growth opportunities and flexibility. And many hospitality jobs, which are service oriented, obviously don't appear necessarily to be what they are looking for. So this is certainly something important we're going to have to take a look at as an industry and figure out how we're going to address this workforce issue, just like so many other industries are as well. So as far as next steps for the program, our team is going to regroup internally and discuss ways we can be of greater assistance. So we certainly welcome any ideas that TAC members may have about not just this job fair, but in general, addressing workforce for our industry. We know it's going to be critically important. And then finally, as I mentioned in our last meeting, we're going to be hosting another one of our continuing educational sessions. This next one is called How I Love New York Can Help You. It's taking place on November 18th. And the goal of that is to talk to industry partners, even beyond the TPA world, to attractions, lodging, others out in the industry, about how they can work with us and how I Love New York can support them and kind of help us help you sort of thing. We already have 100 registrants for that. So that indicates to us that this is going to be a very valuable webinar. And we're excited to let folks know what I Love New York does for the industry and how they can best work with us to benefit their businesses. That was my what I wanted to present to the TAC. Happy to hear any questions or comments.
Getting a thumbs up from Val.
Okay, good.
Ross, that was terrific, and a huge amount of information. I guess one question for you, or my question for you, asking you to read the tea leaves. both in the sort of international travel sector and then also in the employment. Where do you see that going over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I hesitate to do tea leaf reading because that rarely is helpful. But I mean, certainly we're optimistic about the international. All of our research, even throughout COVID and even more recently, indicates a pent up demand there for Canada, even other countries, and we think New York State is well positioned to take advantage of that, particularly given what we're hearing people are looking for, the idea of having the outdoors as part of their trip. We're optimistic about that. Workforce, as I indicated, I think the tourism industry is trying to figure that out like everybody else. There's certainly challenges. I mean, I think there's some real advantages to working in the tourism industry. Sometimes there is more flexibility of schedule. It's an industry that is all over the state. So, where you're located doesn't sort of doesn't limit your possibilities. So, but I do think we're going to have to figure things out. It's clearly a whole new world. And so far, it's not as simple as build it and they will come. Just because the jobs are there doesn't mean people are running to them. So it's definitely something we're going to have to look at.
Hey, Ross, I have a question. Thank you for
Sure, David.
a great presentation there. When you were talking about the increased revenue coming in, the 25 million from the governor and the federal, is that going to be a significant increase over what you've typically have received in previous years?
Yeah. I mean, recent years, over the last, 5 to 10 years, there's been a significant investment in tourism by New York State government. We've had a government, legislature, and a governor that has understood the importance of tourism, thankfully, and have been very good at reflecting that in the budget and our resources. But this is additional money. The federal money is additional. This governor's announcement, at least a good chunk of that is new marketing money. So it is putting us probably to some of the highest levels we've been at in a while.
Great. And then
so
Ross, with that additional money, then do you anticipate at the next TAC meeting or in future TAC meetings to communicate what you plan to do with that additional money? Are you looking to do more of the same or something new? Should we start seeing
Sure.
a more increased presence of marketing in the global marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll talk about that as the plans are coming together. I mean, some of it we've talked about already. I mean, in some cases, this is about sort of more bigger, deeper. In other words, it is marketing money, particularly what the governor just announced this week, to allow us to be in some long haul and fly markets that we haven't been in a while, or run more frequently in some places. Internationally, a lot of our work over the past number of years has been B2B, has been sort of focusing on the travel trade, tour operators, travel agents. As you heard, we have certainly in COVID, post-COVID, been doing a little more consumer marketing internationally. This money may allow us to do that more extensively, which would be great. And as you heard me mention at the last TAC meeting, our proposal to the federal EDA also includes that international marketing, also includes promoting outdoor recreation, but also will allow us to go, as the governor's announcement did, a little more into the conference, meetings, expositions, business, as well as amateur sports, as well as group travel. And those areas have not necessarily been as robust as our focus on consumers, individual consumer travel. So that is hopefully kind of a new realm that this additional funding will let us go into as well. I mean, I'm excited to be able to have this holistic view of tourism, recognizing that, it's not just the next vacation someone's taking. That is very, very important to what we do, but there are other important segments as well. And I'm excited that we're going to be able to go a little bigger in those other areas as well.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to move ahead then. And Valerie, was that a hand or no? No, okay. I'm going to move ahead and introduce our guest speaker. Thank you, Ross. Thank you so much. And also, I just wanted to mention the ad looks great, and I'm glad that it's getting widely distributed, which is, David, to your point, it's different than what it's beyond what we've done in the past. So I think that's a good point. You mentioned the marquee attractions, and of course that reminds me of the Marriott Marquis. And I just wanted to let you know that George and Tim is on the line. So George, welcome. Who heads up all the Marriotts in New York City. Our guest speaker today is somebody who we know very well, no stranger to TAC, Jim McKenna from Roost. He's here representing the entire Adirondack region today. And as you may recall, prior to the pandemic, we had been inviting TPAs from various regions across the state to give a more in-depth report on the specific vacation region. And the Adirondacks are, of course, an important region when discussing winter tourism, but they also had a unique experience throughout the pandemic. So we've asked Jim to give us an update on how tourism is doing in the North Country and what the recovery process looks like. Please welcome Jim McKenna.
Thank you, Christine. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Everybody hear me all right? Yes?
Yep,
All
so
right.
good, Jim.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to recognize, I'm going to recognize Dan Fuller, because I was on this, I was on the TAC back in the 90s, and Dan, you're still there. It's great to see. It's nice to see that you're still with it, and I think continuity certainly helps all organizations like TAC. Secondly, I want to comment real quickly on the governor's leadership with the $450 million. I think that it's geared in the right areas, and I think it's going to tremendously help us. You can all hear me, correct? Thumbs up? Yes?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. And also, the program of New York City, that's a great campaign. I'm so glad that it's running internationally. And I think that we have to remember New York City's our driver, and we have to make sure the city's back and in full swing, and it just ripples throughout the state. So I'm glad to see that, and we're concentrating on New York City. I think that's quite important. The Adirondacks, and my plan today is to talk a little bit about 2020, talk about our Regional Tourism Council, look at 21, little mentions of outdoor rec, talk a little bit about the short-term rental issues that we are all facing and probably growing, talking about the challenges that we might see coming in the Adirondacks, and also sort of end a little bit on how DMOs, like the organization I work for, we have to change to continue to be relevant. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that. And I'll get a little bit of what that means. Talk a little bit about the real differentiator of the Adirondacks, which is the environment. And finally, touch briefly on the World University Games. So that's my plan to run through a little bit today. 2020, pandemic. Come March, as the rest of the state and the world almost shut down, certainly the Adirondacks did as well. Overall, our ARTC, we sort of tried to take an approach that was a little different, but I think it was the foundation of the direction we're going to go in the future. And what that was about is it's understanding to reopen as the pandemic came to a conclusion. We had to engage residents as well as businesses in our region, at the same time re-engaging with the potential traveler. So the new dimension that I think is carrying well beyond 2020 for at least a lot of the DMOs up in the Adirondacks is the community relations, the reach out, understanding that you must have your community on board and understanding the approaches you're taking, as well as the potential traveler. And I think that's sort of, I'll talk a little bit about that at the end, but that's sort of the new paradigm for DMOs. But get into that 2020. Certainly the Adirondacks, because of its outdoor open spaces and outdoor recreation opportunities, overall, the Adirondack region saw a 15% decline in 2020 with tourism spend, and that was probably the least amount of decline in the state of New York by tourism region. In fact, one of our counties actually showed an increase, a 0.1% increase, but overall, we felt the pandemic as well as everybody else, and how we communicated overall as a region to both residents and potential travelers, we think helped us rebound quite rapidly. And I think that's important. What we did see is that we did see much more travel to the Adirondacks from New York State than in other years. Western New York especially seemed to gravitate more up towards the Adirondacks. We saw that very clearly. We also saw a party size increase from really about 3.2 people up to 4.5 people per.
Jim, I don't think is everybody else still hearing Jim?
No, we lost them.
No,
No.
not.
Increase in both party size
Okay.
and length of stay. Short-term rentals, party size went up to 6.9 people per party, and length of stay went to 10 days. So that's where we saw a big shift. Now that's probably families traveling together and also coming in and renting a place. They're staying some as long as 2 weeks. So we certainly saw that. So 2020, as we got through it, again, with the closures, overall, the Adirondack region saw a decline of 15%. What did that do to our Regional Tourism Council? So clearly, as March, April, and May was in effect, we actually put Visit Adirondacks on hold. We paused it. And, we had to make some real hard decisions on the directions that the council and the Regional Council would go moving forward. And we pretty much stayed throughout 2020. We stayed pretty much in a pause mode for Visit Adirondacks. However, when 21 turned around, we saw that the reinstatement of the matching funds and programming, what we did is we looked at the matching funds, and then our 7 counties of the Adirondack Regional Tourism Council made a very significant decision about how they would all engage and start doing some of the programming that historically the council did on its own. So all of our counties donated time and efforts to go along with the matching funds. And looking at this, looking back now, although we're not at the end of the year, we were able to accomplish quite a bit. We launched and made improvements to a new website, Visit Adirondacks. We executed a new contract with Workshop to basically continue to do our SEO content and relaunched our page strategy. We also, one of our counties stepped forward, actually Essex County, and we reinstated a regional Visit Adirondacks email campaign. This is in 21. We continued to manage the Visit Adirondacks social media in a unique way. Every week, a different county took over responsibility for the social media. So every week we had a different TPA doing the social media for the region. And every 8th week you would be doing it, your county would be on board again. So we sort of managed it amongst ourselves, which continues today. And certainly we did a certain amount of guides. We did some print material, but we also, really co-opt with Rove Mobile Tracking and STR rental data, working with with Travel Industry Association, a lot of co-programming we did more so than we have in the past. So even though our ARTC, our Adirondack Regional Tourism Council, we are structured different now, we feel we're starting to reaccomplish what we were doing in 1919. And the numbers for 21 are overall looking pretty encouraging for the region. Just looking at some reports from the Lake George Warren County region, they had one of the best summers on record, we're told. And here's a quote from Gina Mincer. We've been blowing it out of the park. So, I mean, the opportunity there is good. The outdoor recreation combined with our close proximity to urban markets has positioned the Adirondacks well. Essex County, year to date through September, is actually running 32% ahead in occupancy tax collections compared to 19. So we're seeing some significant growth. We're seeing more midweek travel than we have historically, and that's making certainly an impact on the industry here. Outdoor recreation has been a key. People have certainly looked at the Adirondacks and its wide open spaces as being something very unique in the Northeast U.S., and it's certainly, we're feeling the results of that. One area that's been really hard for us to really wrap our hands around fully is the short-term rental situation. Clearly, it's an issue, you know, not only in the Adirondacks, but globally right now. But in an area like the Adirondacks, which are limited in development potential, you know, there's hamlet areas in the Adirondacks where you can have development. Once you get outside the hamlets or the village areas, it's very limited. Short-term rentals in the Adirondacks has certainly been a point that people are concerned about and trying to develop programming to accommodate it. What happens is certainly people are looking at which had historically been, you know, traditional community housing now can be an investment property where you can make money because the demand is there. So that is really starting to help us focus on how we wrap our hands around that. So the short-term rental phenomenon is something that we're working on, and we have to understand really that if you lose your community housing stock in an area like the Adirondacks, it's pretty hard to replace it. So we've got to wrap our hands around that. And that's really, you know, leading up to areas that the organization I work for, we're starting to work on more and more. It's really figuring out, as Ross said earlier, figuring out the staffing situation. Not only is there a lack of staff, but the problem in the Adirondacks is there's a lack of place to house staff. So we're working on housing. One of our DMOs, when I worked for, basically spent about a year and a half on developing a housing program that's now coming to fruition, about 400 new housing units that cannot be used for short-term rentals and have some controls in them, not all low income, but looking at market rate up to about 150% of regional AMI or county AMI. Broadband issue is still an issue in the Adirondacks. So is cell service. You know, let's say we're fortunate we get somebody coming up from the metropolitan area and they get to the Adirondacks, all of a sudden there's 20 miles with no street lights. And then they have no cell service. How do you feel? So we're addressing those issues as well as we move on. I want to talk a little bit about, at this point, about DMOs and how to stay relevant, especially in predominantly resort or tourism areas. They have to put their community first. And why I say that is because if we look around the world right now, we see population growth overall. Tourism is going to continue to grow. Especially when we have Ross Levi leading our New York State effort. But it's going to grow, population's going to grow, younger travelers, they want to get out there, they want to see and experience the world. So places that are dependent on tourism can easily get themselves into a situation where there's event fatigue, where there's over-tourism, where there's not a connection with the community. And that's the area I feel is of most importance moving forward, is developing a program that puts your community first and really structured in a way that there's direct community benefits from the tourism industry. Because what happens is that if you're in a city, a community, a town, a resort town, and you're overwhelmed by constant tourism, all of a sudden you change your attitude on it. And you become anti-tourism. And we've seen that happen around the world. So what we're trying to focus on now is we're developing what's called a management plan for tourism for the greater Lake Placid region. And that's starting to deal with issues like diversifying the economy beyond tourism so that there's more other sustainable jobs on a regular basis. Increase long-term housing diversity. And what I mean by that, everybody always talks about affordable housing. And affordable housing has a formula, 30% of your income should be dedicated to housing. It gets confused a little bit with affordable as opposed to low income. So housing diversity is what we're looking at. All income levels have to be satisfied to have a good community. We're also working on trying to get a regional approach to improve environmental sustainability. So we're entering that field because that's the differentiator. And other areas that traditionally DMOs don't enter, but to have a good tourism business, to have a good tourism economy, you need support of the community. So I guess my point is that destination marketing organizations like who I work for, have to broaden their horizons to stay relevant and to grow their industry and show more real direct benefits to residents of a community. So we're focusing on that, and I think that has to continue. The other area I'll talk about briefly is the environmental sustainability. Certainly the Adirondacks, the number one differentiator is the environment, is the outdoor views, is the open country. It's the largest park area in the continental U.S. with stringent zoning laws. How do we take advantage of that? More importantly, how do we maintain that for the future? Because that really is the differentiator for the Adirondacks. And finally, I'm going to mention the World University Games because Christine and you mentioned Adirondack Mac, but those games are doing more than just the Lake Placid region. You know, there's been a lot of commitment to the Plattsburgh International Airport by the state and others. So that's become the gateway airport for the world for the for the World University Games. However, we know from our past experience when people are coming from Europe and everywhere else, they want to stop at the city too. So we certainly know there's going to be a lot of interaction with New York City. That particular event, it's going to be Plattsburgh. Preliminary hockey games are going to be held in the Canton, Potsdam area. Curling is going to be held in Saranac Lake. Wilmington is the site of the alpine skiing, and North Creek and Gore Mountain is going to be the site of the freestyle skiing. And it's pretty much been determined, or at least I'm told, that the final hockey game will be the USA versus Russia. I don't know if we know that yet, but that's what we're here. I'm just kidding when I say that, but that's the type of, we hope it gets there. World University Games, over 50 nations, 2,500 athletes and officials. Viewership outside the U.S. is 350 million. And I think that's it.
I think that's pretty impressive. I don't think that's just as Barberly Diamondstein Spielvogel. I'm going to just ask if you could please go on mute. Thank you. Any questions for Jim McKenna and the amazing things that he's doing up in the Adirondacks?
Yeah, Jim, this is Dan Fuller, and great report this morning, and it's wonderful to hear your voice. Since there was quite obviously an uptick a little bit in the outdoor with Adirondacks, and probably a lot of those folks came from Western New York and around all of New York State as they stayed a little bit closer to home, have you really given some consideration to say, okay, how do we keep that going in the future?
We certainly have, Dan, and it's, you know, we actually did through the data sources that we have, we've been able to really figure out, you know, where they are and who they are. And yes, we don't see that trend changing in the very near future. We think people have rediscovered drive-to destinations, and we feel strongly that that's going to continue. And yes, we're concentrating on making sure we can not only continue to bring the people that have come last year here, but also figure out real in detail who they are and attract more of that type of person.
Thank you.
Jim, what are the plans for the mascot? You didn't mention the mascot.
Well, the mascot's going to be all over the state over the next 12 months. And first, as the governor announced last Friday, that Adirondack Mac is out there. He's cute, he's big, and we think he'll be a real celebrity, especially amongst high school and younger folks, and build the excitement for the games.
Good stuff. Okay. Well, thank you, Jim McKenna. You know, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to continue to invite TPAs from different regions over the coming months so that we can get a more granular picture of how the state is doing. Before we wrap up, I do thank Tom Mulroy for joining us. Is there any new business or public comments at this time? Ross, do you see any? No? Okay. All right. Well,
no, I think we're good.
In respect of time, I do want to wrap up so that we can continue to promote New York State and you guys can continue to do such an amazing job. Our next scheduled meeting is for Monday, January 24th at 11 a.m. And I need a motion to adjourn. Anybody? Anthony? Okay, I saw Anthony, and for a second, was that Ally? I think that was Ally. Okay.
Yes.
Very good. So the meeting is adjourned. I wish you all a very wonderful Thanksgiving and holiday season. Get out there and enjoy our beautiful state. Thank you, Ross and Kelly and the team at ESD for the great work that you're doing. All right, take care.
Okay, take care.
Thank
Thank
you,
you all.
everyone.